out there, friends and neighbors, and what's going on? You found us. It's me. I guess you could say COVID Cam, and me amigo Kyle Filio Filson, and you've got us here on Expanded Perspectives.
How's it going, everybody? Yes, I'm here, enjoying the day so far. Got up early, started taking care of things early today. I don't know, just my eyes popped open like a vampire, and I just rose straight up stiff like a board, you know?
Like on What We Do in the Shadows?
Yeah, exactly. Or like a Nosferatu.
Yes.
Yeah, I just woke up today and I was like, you know, what am I doing? Let's get the day going.
Let's rock and roll.
Let's start checking emails, things like that. Yeah. Next thing you know, I'm making myself my own little version of an Egg McMuffin. Got my French press out, making some coffee. The rest of the family's sound asleep the way I like it. See, I get a lot of work done early in the morning when everybody's
late at night.
Late at night because that's when it's quiet at Filson Manor.
Yeah.
Because, you know, with 3 kids and a wife and 3 cats now. Yeah, that's right, 3 cats.
Yeah. For a man that said, man, I'm never going to have a cat, tonight you got 3.
I have changed. When I was a younger person, I didn't really care for cats. So we always had a cat at our house, but it was more like an outdoor.
Barn cat.
Farm cat, barn cat. Yeah, I mean, we never had cats indoors. But my father's allergies and mine as well when I was younger. I don't know, whatever reason, I used to sneeze a lot around cats and it doesn't bother me now. But anyways, you know, they were just outside cats, never was attached to them. I was more of a dog person. But now that I'm older, I actually think I'm more of a cat person than a dog person. Look, I love dogs. They're awesome, but they do require a lot of work. Where a cat, I mean...
You're just raising little murderers. That's all you're doing.
Yeah, well, Hazel Cat brought me a bird the other day.
Yep, there you go.
A little female cardinal.
Well, I've been defending my homestead against rabbits.
That's right, yeah. Every once in a while when I come to your house, I see these wild, like, rabbits. Not native rabbits, not like cottontails. These are like pets. I don't know the breeds. I've been to the stock show. I don't remember their names.
Yeah. It's a rabbit. All right. That's all I know it is. Yeah, this started several weeks ago. I said it's our neighbor, but I don't really know if that's our neighbor across the street from where we live. It may be the neighbors behind them. But either way, we had 4 rabbits start showing up in our yard. We had an actual cottontail that I think just joined the gang because it was bored. And then we had an all-black rabbit, an all-white rabbit, and then a large, like what looked like a cottontail, but a great big version. And they all are like milling around in my yard, and I don't mind. We sit out there and drink coffee in the morning and watch them. The problem is they found my wife's flowers. Uh-oh. And she was growing like a bunch of sweet potato vines coming out of stuff, and they've eaten all that off. Then they found her rose bush that she had going that she'd been working since a sprout, basically, to get up. They've eaten that down to nothing. This whole deal. So, meat's back on the menu, boys.
Oh, no.
I may have to go. I'm going to go talk to the neighbors and tell them, hey, look, man, your rabbits are in my yard, and I don't care that they're over there, but we got a problem with them eating all the flowers. And, I mean, they are decimating the flowers. Now, I left to go to work the other day, and they're standing up on those big ceramic pots. They're standing up like, eating over in it. And these are big rabbits. These are pretty good size rabbits.
One of them is huge.
Yeah, that tan one is a giant.
Yeah.
Oh, and one of the white one's gone. One of these, a woman, I looked out the window the other day and a lady just stopped in the middle of the road, got out, grabbed it, got in her car and just drove off.
Yeah, that's bizarre because, like, what if that was your pet rabbit? Like, what if you like to let your pet rabbits out in the yard at night?
Yeah.
You just
stole the neighbor's
rabbit. Yeah.
So anyway, I don't know what I'm going to do with the whole deal, but yeah, the trouble is the whole rosebush thing. My wife doesn't know about it. I found it when I was leaving the house this morning. So I ran the rabbits off. They probably came right back, but yeah, I'm going to keep that quiet, folks. Don't tell her. I'm going to have to break the news to her, and she's not going to be happy about that.
You know, when you go to the stock show, like in Fort Worth, I mean, have you seen all the different varieties of rabbits that there even exist? I had no clue. Till I remember seeing it the first time. I was like, there's like 200 species.
Well, you and I, we've cooked and eaten rabbit multiple times, but I never realized, of course, because we didn't do it down here, I didn't realize that people today still grew them like you would grow them for a protein source. Like you could raise rabbits like you would raise chickens. I had no idea because I didn't know anybody that did that. We just, took wild rabbits. That's the way it all went. But yeah, I had no idea there's so many. Like I saw one, there's a giant, I don't mean to get off on rabbit talk before we get into crazy stuff, folks, but I saw a picture online of a dude holding one that's like a 55-pounder.
Jeez.
It looks like a dog, and it's a giant rabbit. You think the bigger the foot, the more the luck?
Maybe. That's a good question.
Right? I need
like
to
a
get
big
that.
one?
Like a big, giant, lucky rabbit's foot. And if you had a big giant lucky rabbit's foot on the 13th of February in 1989 in the province of Leningrad, Russia, you would want to rub it.
Okay.
Here's why. 3 drivers from the Leningrad Auto Park. Now, y'all know that I'm an amazing enunciator when it comes to Russian names.
Oh, yeah.
You know, I mean, like, I nail it.
It's well
every
documented.
time. Well documented. Well documented. So this guy's name is Yuri Vasilievich.
Nice.
And Sergei, I know y'all are blown away. The main men are names Yuri, Sergei, and Alexander.
Yeah, I know that Sergey guy. He played in the KHL.
He did. And I think Alexander may have tried. But anyway, these 3 men had gone driving on a fishing trip at a location about 130 kilometers from Leningrad, right outside of a town called Sosnil Bor, where a nuclear plant is located. And suddenly...
They make good pierogies.
Right? Suddenly, Alexander saw a UFO overhead, like above. And then they all noticed this white object. That's when they finally all saw it. It turns out it's a white object 3 or 4 times larger than what they said was a bright star in the sky. So that's how I guess they could tell it was closer. It's much larger than what it seems. And they said it seemed to be moving in their direction, and it suddenly made a sharp jump to the left and then continued flying. And after looking at the object, they say for about 15 minutes, they just lost interest in it. They were like, well, we don't know what that is, and they go on. So they go on. A little bit later, they're having dinner, and they're setting up camp. And the one that they call, I think it was Yuri that they're actually talking about this. But anyway, they go into the woods. They're looking for firewood. It's already dark. Comes walking back out about 40 meters along the shore of this lake. And he's only a little ways into the woods, like 60, 70 feet into the woods. He said this object, he sees it, I guess. It's a beautiful round shape. He said it has windows around its broadest section. And it's made out of a dark material. Now, it goes on to say that the soft light was emanating from the windows. So he began studying this object and noticed that neither hatches nor doors are anywhere on it, that the whole surface is totally smooth. Now, I said that there were some indentions that you could see, but he felt no fear, and he just stared at the object just for about 15 or 20 seconds. Now, what's wild is he said, I thought about calling my buddies over to take a look, but I thought, man, it might scare the hell out of them.
Yeah, right.
So, of course, nothing. They just looked to the left. He said, I'm looking around the object, and I noticed there's a figure like a shadow walking towards the back of the object. And he says, then I noticed there's a second figure to the right side of the craft, and then there's a third one standing between the first and the second one. So he thought that maybe they were leaving and became somewhat concerned, but he wasn't scared. So he said, well, maybe I can get a load of this, catch one of these aliens and put it in my car. But then he was like,
that's easier said than done.
Right.
I heard those rascals are real wirely.
Well, I always think about like that when they talk about people wanting to catch them is in Ghostbusters when he goes, grab her. And then the librarian ghost is like, roar.
Yeah.
He's like, that was your plan, Ray? Grab her? You know, so that's this whole deal. So finally he's like, no, I'm not going to grab one. But goes on to say that the aliens moved real slow and they were making no sound. So you could see them moving. No sound came from them, and no sound was coming from the craft. Now it says when one of the aliens was about 10 meters away from him, he yells at it, making friendly advances. Walks up like, hey, man, I'm not trying to hurt you. What's going on? Said the figures approached in silence. 2 of them finally came very close. Said the aliens were generally human-looking, but not completely. Their mouths were tightly closed. No lips were visible. With a proportional head, no hair that was visible on it at all, and said a rarely just kind of expressionless face other than just concentration, like it was really studying him. They're dressed in tight-fitting gray outfits. Now, he goes on to say that the third alien kind of stood aside from all the rest, and he said that's whenever the witness saw a flash, like a photo flash. He said then he felt pressure in his head, and he heard a voice, he said, that felt like it came from the center of his brain. And he said the voice was very raspy and almost metallic-like, and it asked, what are you doing here? And he answered that he had come on a fishing trip with his buddies. He said, would you like to come with us? And he said he thought about it and was tempted, and the voice said, you will not return. We need to know what your inner structure is.
Yeah, no, that's definitely a hard no.
Yeah. And the witness then declined it, said, no, I'm good, player. I think I'm out. Says, then the alien voice said very threatening, if you start a nuclear war, we will destroy you. He says, I don't know if he meant me personally or humanity. He goes on to say that, of course, I guess he's hoping, maybe the witness, maybe the humans won't, of course, do this. He said at this point, he heard a noise that sounded like the humming from like power lines. Mm-hmm. And he said, then he goes, at that moment, he become terrified because he saw about a 4-meter tall, huge, shaggy, humanoid figure with a head resembling that of an ape standing there above the witness, just staring down at him. He then remembered seeing the aliens move suddenly away from him, disappearing behind the trees. He didn't notice how they entered the ship, but the object slowly and silently ascended, and before leaving, it emitted a bright flash of light that illuminated the entire area like a giant lightning flash.
Right.
Says then the craft rose up about 4 meters and then poof, was just gone. And apparently the big hairy thing, the Bigfoot type creature, got on the craft with them. Said it all left at the same time.
I think Bigfoot is like their guard dog.
Or they're like, they hire him like a hitman or like a contractor. He's there for protection.
Yeah, this alien seems like a real jerk. I mean, these guys are out fishing, and it ask him, "What are you doing here?" It's like, "What are you doing here?"
Yeah, right.
We live here.
Yeah, be like somebody in your front yard asking you what you're doing here.
Yeah,
you're like, what? Yeah. So there's that. So if you're ever out fishing in Russia near Stalingrad or Leningrad or whatnot, be very, very careful. The aliens out there bring. Of course, it's in Russia.
They did
in Mother Russia. Aliens bring Bigfoot,
and they did ask him if he wanted to go. They didn't just take him.
That was pretty decent.
They were
of them,
polite,
right?
so I'm wrong. He wasn't a jerk. He was kind of polite, I guess.
But it was like, we need to know what your inner structure is.
Yeah, that's not good. When anybody needs to know what your inner structure is, that's not a good thing.
Yeah.
But what is it with the uniforms? They always wear like one-piece, skin-tight uniforms. Like there's no aliens out there that sag.
Well, there's not that you don't like to be comfortable. Like you don't want to be.
That's what I'm talking about.
How come there's no aliens in shorts? Like, does it never get warm on that ship? Like, it's never like, man, it is so stuffy.
What is it with old guys in jorts?
Well, you're wearing some.
I mean, I just don't understand.
You got your phone on your
hit
hip?
like 40, they wear jean shorts. They wear the plastic holster for their phone.
Tuck your shirt in every time.
I mean, when I buy a new phone, that's the first thing I throw out if it comes with one. It's like, who wears the holster?
I've never understood the whole holster thing.
I never have either. And I have another theory. Every time you see somebody walk around with one of those Bluetooth things that go in their ears, I'm not talking about AirPods. I'm talking about
talking to people. Is this what you're going to
I've never seen anybody with any importance that uses them.
No.
Like everybody I see that has that, you're like, dude, your hands are so busy. You're trading stocks. You're doing so much stuff that you don't have time to hold a phone.
Everybody that I've ever seen wearing one, talking out in public like that, is walking around a convenience store carrying 2 packs of powdered donuts and a sugary soda.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not hating.
I don't mean to be hating. I do like powdered donuts.
Who don't?
I'm going to tell you real quick, not to get off the subject. Do you know how nice it is to get out of that, the COVID lockdown and be able to go get like some junk food? Because you go for like 2 weeks, like you just got to have whatever they'll deliver to your house or whatever you got laying around there. And then you start craving things like, man, I wished I had some chips. Like I'd like to have some Cool Ranch or some Ruffles. And then you're like, but I don't have any way of getting them. So looks like I'm in for the long haul.
Have you ever tried making your own potato chips?
Yes, I have. Like the kettle chips?
Yeah, how'd it turn out?
Not worth a damn.
No, I never tried it.
I need to figure it out. But no, it's one of those, I just wasn't very good. You know what I want? I want a tortilla maker. Like the ones you see in all those Mexican food restaurants on the carousel that spins and you can actually watch it.
Like a Papacitos or something?
I want one of those in my house to where you can just turn it on. Like, how cool would it be to invite your friends over? Like, oh, yeah, we got a wet bar at my house. I'm like, dude, I got a tortilla maker.
That's pretty cool. It'd be cool if you did it by hand, the press and everything.
I used to work with a lady. Well, and we've talked, about Jeff before. It's his wife, Lydia, and she makes tortillas by hand. Mm-hmm. And she's 100% Hispanic, and they are unbelievable. Oh, yeah. And I want her. She kept like, I'm gonna show, and I've just never gone. It doesn't look real hard, but I want to learn hers because hers are awesome. But she'll make the big ones, and I like the real big thin ones where you can really pack a lot of stuff in it.
Dude, go to that
an edible plate. That's all it is.
Go to that meat market on South Main. If you go in the front of there, almost every day they have a cooler, and in that cooler is warm handmade tortillas that some old lady makes every day.
I don't need to know this.
And they're cheap as chickens. I mean, you can get like a dozen is like $2.
How
and
many
they are
do you
so
eat
much
warm?
better. Huh?
Like you throw a little butter and honey
Oh,
on
yeah,
them
just
and
put a little butter on there and a little honey. Yeah, you're golden.
It's on.
Dude, now you're making me hungry.
Yeah, right?
Check this out. It says, hey, guys, my name is Andy, and I'm from Texas.
What up, Andy?
I ran across...
I know an Andy from Texas.
I do, too. I hope
and
it's not
he is
him.
not trustworthy.
I hope it's not him. I ran across your podcast a few months ago, and I've been binge listening for a while. So I decided to call or write in a cryptid story from a while ago when I was a kid. When I was about 17, my brother, a friend, and I were hunting in the wilderness behind our subdivision, just south of Laredo, Texas. The area was being developed, so we were walking through wide swaths, about 50 yards of rough dirt that had been bulldozed through the mesquite and Palo Blanco trees on the rolling hills. On either side of these swaths, that one day would be streets, were huge piles of dead trees, cactus, and grass. It was a gray day, rainy and cold. I think it was December of 1983 or January 1984. We were on our way home, walking downhill in the middle of one of these open dirt swaths. Then we saw it. At the very base of the hill, about 30 or 40 yards away, a large black canid, a dog-like creature, ran from our left to our right, leaving the tangled brush on one side and dashing into the tree pile on the other side. The way the animal moved and its shape made me think it was a hyena. However,
There was a hyena out there?
hyenas are not black. My brother and I just watched as our friend raised his .22 rifle and fired all of his ammo at the running creature.
Don't do that.
He didn't hit anything. He rarely did. He was always a terrible shot and tended to use volume in place of accuracy. We saw the creature for maybe 10 or 15 seconds as it loped across the opening. I never felt frightened, as it never looked towards us. It was just on the move. After it passed, I turned to my brother, who must have been 12 or 13, and asked, "Did you see that?" He said, "Yeah, it was a hyena." I said, "Yeah, me too." We made our way home, and later we continued hunting in those woods, never seeing that creature again. I had forgotten all about it until I was in grad school in 2010. I was reading on Lauren Coleman's cryptid site, and he had posted a story about the Shunka Warak. And this is a rare Native American cryptid. Mm-hmm. A specimen had been shot in the 19th century, and its taxidermied body had been displayed in a general store from some time before being lost. The article was about how the specimen had been found, and when I saw the photo, I thought, that's what we saw. I emailed Coleman, saying that I believed my brother and I and our friend were the last living people to see a Shunka, relating the same story that I just told you, which I received no response. I'm a native Texan. My brothers and I have been lifelong hunters with guns and bows. We have hunted all over the state and know the animals that are in our woods. This was not one of them. It was not a coyote, nor was it a Mexican wolf. It was not a dog. And after much research, I think it might have been something like a relict ringdocus, or a hyena-like canid that existed in the Americas in the past and is believed to have gone extinct about 10,000 years ago. Additionally, I'm not an idiot. We have plenty of those in Texas. I possess a degree in anthropology from the University of Texas at Austin and a master's degree in rhetoric and composition from Texas State University in San Marcos. Prior to that, I served as a paratrooper in the 82nd Airborne Division for a few years. Peace. Thanks for what you do, Andy. Well, thanks, Andy. Thanks for your service. That's crazy.
Yeah.
There's so many of these sightings of these hyena-looking creatures, not just in Texas, but all over the U.S. I mean,
there's been several.
We've done several episodes on it.
In that whole area of Texas, there's been several hyena sightings down there.
So I wonder if he's right in the fact that maybe it's a creature that is in fact extant, that's not really extinct. There's just a small pocket of them still living, much like the thylacine.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it is weird. Like, what could you, like he said, it's like you're not mistaking this for something else.
No, he said he's a lifelong hunter.
He got a clear look at it.
He's in the broad daylight.
Yeah.
I like the time. 1983, 1984, they're walking around with a .22 long rifle, shooting at stuff. I mean, that reminds me exactly of the kind of stuff I did as a kid.
Mm-hmm.
Nowadays, I mean, kids don't do that no more.
I did it every day. Every day.
Right?
That's what I did. Every day, every weekend. That's all I did. Hang out in the woods with my gun. And
you could do a lot with a Marlin M60. Right? Those things are amazing.
Yep. That's so wild, though, man. I can't imagine seeing. It's one thing to see like a Bigfoot or an alien or something insane, but when you see something hyena-like and you know what it is,
Yeah.
and you're like, I know what that resembles very, very closely. Like, it's just, if a hyena was 100, this is 95% hyena. Like, there's a little change there. But you know, it's like, that looks like a normal animal, but it doesn't belong here. And I've never seen one quite like it. Like, where did it come from?
Right. I'm with you.
Because, you know, you and I have talked about whenever people see, and we've talked about this off air quite a bit, when people see animals that don't belong, like they appear to be from like a private collection,
Yes.
they don't necessarily act like a real wild animal, because if they've spent their life in some sort of captivity and then they get loose, they don't quite, especially after some time in captivity, it seems like they just don't quite act the same.
I know what you're saying. Yeah, that's a good point.
And so when you see them, you're like, yeah, I can tell something's not right about this critter, right? You know what I mean? Like,
Right. It looks like something that's gotten loose versus something wild.
You know what I would really like to know is this. How come we never get any sightings of like any strange horse-shaped creatures, or people seeing like ghost stampedes or something like that? Because you would think if you've got like at Gettysburg, or if you have like Little Bighorn, you would think that you would not only see the dead cowboys, you know, the cavalry soldiers, you would also see the horses.
That's a good point.
And so I don't understand why we don't see, I don't know. There's a lot of stuff I don't understand, as we all know. So here's one thing that I don't understand.
What's that?
This takes place back on May 30th of 2000 in Chile, Tocopilla Hills, Chile, actually. Says the local residents living next to these hills were suddenly awakened by a very strange and loud noise at about 2 a.m. And at first they thought it was a person climbing the hill. But after observing it in much greater detail, they realized that whatever they were seeing was not human. So here we go again. It looks a little bit like a person, but it's not quite. So something they had never seen before. And they said it was climbing this hill very, very rapidly, despite somewhat 80-degree incline up the face. This is what they described. They described it reptilian, with movements like a small lizard. It was very fast, very agile, bigger than a condor, brown in color with bright red eyes, and it appeared to have what they described was feathers covering its body, and it emitted a loud quack-like noise, and that was heard every night for the next few weeks, and all the dogs would go crazy every time that noise would start.
What?
So what can that be? Something that's larger than a condor. So what are we talking, over 4 foot? What's a condor, like 3 foot or tall? I mean, I don't know how big a condor.
Yeah.
So we're talking about still feathered, but they said it was reptilian-like in its movements. They said like a small lizard, but big, brown, and had feathers.
Well,
so
if
what's
you
on the
defeathered
ground
if you
running?
defeathered a bird, it would look kind of reptilian.
Yeah,
Skin,
but if it's
right?
on the ground and it's got feathers, what runs? I mean, what do we got? Like a giant kiwi? What's running around down there?
I don't know.
That's so more crazy.
What a bizarre sighting.
Yeah, some kind of crazy sighting. So, yet again, Philly, what are you going to be discussing today?
I'm going to be talking about some like 3 lesser known serial killers, including you were speaking about Russians earlier, the Wolf of Moscow.
Oh, word.
Let's take a break. You're listening to Expanded Perspectives. What if I were to tell you that there have been 220,000 unsolved murders in the United States since 1980? That's a lot. Some of them are probably accidental. Someone accidentally hits a homeless person or hitchhiker and then speeds off. Others are probably gang-related or drug deals gone bad, but others are most likely serial killers. Since 1900, there have been 3,000 identified American serial killers who've collectively killed nearly 10,000 people, says a Dr. Michael Amott, who oversees the Radford University and Florida Gulf Coast University serial killer database. The FBI defines a serial killer as someone who kills 2 or more people in separate events. About 32% of these killers, Amott says, did so for enjoyment, for thrills, for lust, and power. 30% of the killers are for financial reward. Another 18% are in anger, and 6.3% to advance a criminal enterprise, and fewer than 1% because a cult put them up to it. Their favorite murder weapon, of course, was a gun, at 42%, although 6% preferred poison, and 2% axes. About 52% were white, 40% were black, and 6.7% Hispanic. As you would guess, men outnumber women by a factor of 10. So, what makes a serial killer? Probably a combination of genetics and experience. Research shows that certain genes can predispose people to violence. One gene, particularly the so-called warrior gene, is present in about 30% of the population and has been linked to increased aggression. Many serial killers also experienced childhood trauma or early separation from their mothers. As a consequence of that trauma or separation, scientists believe they learned to suppress empathy or suffered damage to the areas of the brain that control emotional impulses. Serial killers often are loners who fear all relationships and seek to control, to destroy other people, to eliminate the possibility of another humiliating rejection. Prolific arsonist Robert Dale Segee, who is believed to have killed 168 and injured hundreds more by setting a fire at a Connecticut circus in 1944, grew up with a dad who punished him by holding his fingers over a candle flame. Jeffrey Dahmer, who killed, dismembered, and partially ate 17 boys and young men beginning in 1978, said he did so not because I hated them, but to keep them with me. Gerald Stano, who killed at least 22 women beginning in the 1970s, compared killing people to stepping on a cockroach. Little said he got sexual pleasure from strangling women with his bare hands, and that by taking their lives, he came to own them. On today's show, I'm going to talk about 3 lesser-known serial killers, including one known to the world as the Wolf of Moscow. Let's begin. Have you ever heard of the killer Carroll Edward Cole? Now, Carroll Cole was not only a notorious serial killer, he is also one of the youngest murderers in American history. According to Carroll Cole, who released an autobiography while in prison, he was just 8 years old when he drowned a classmate who made him mad. The police, who investigated at the time, thought the drowning was accidental and, of course, dismissed the case. Later in life, Carroll, who was in and out of mental hospitals for delusions of violence, and who had even called the police himself to get help for these fantasies. However, no one was able to help him. In 1971, Carroll Cole would start his killing spree, and it would not end until his arrest in 1980. During that time, he would murder 15 women in 3 different states: California, Texas, Nevada. Carroll would be initially tried in Texas, where he was convicted of multiple murders and sentenced to spend the rest of his life in prison. However, Carroll Cole agreed to be extradited to Nevada, where he was facing multiple murder charges. Cole would be convicted on the murder charges, and this time he was sentenced to death. Many believe this is what he wanted, and he even thanked the judge for the death sentence. Carol Cole would be executed in Nevada in 1985. Convicted killer Carol Edward Cole, who insisted that prolonging his life would be a waste of tax dollars, died by lethal injection on Friday, the first execution in the Far West since 1979. At that time, Cole was convicted of killing 5 women. He fulfilled his death wish shortly after 2 a.m. when officials at Nevada's maximum security prison sent powerful doses of 3 undisclosed drugs flowing through an intravenous needle in the condemned man's arm. Strapped to a padded table in a converted gas chamber, Cole, 47, blinked repeatedly but showed no emotion, waiting for the lethal drugs to course through his veins. He had been sedated earlier to prevent any final resistance. 17 reporters and 8 designated witnesses, nearly all of them in court or in law enforcement officials, had gathered to watch the execution. But looking out from behind one of the chamber's 3 large windows, Cole seemed to notice only 2 of the witnesses, Mike and Judy Newton, a Las Vegas couple, writing his biography. His last words to them was, "It's all right," he mouthed through the glass. It took only 5 minutes. Moments later, as the lethal drugs began to flow, Cole closed his eyes, coughed, and appeared to convulse, gasping for breath. Over the next several seconds, his chest heaved mechanically, and his head slowly arched back. His lips parted, his eyelids opened slightly. Then he lay still. It had taken Cole 5 minutes to die. He was ready to go. He wanted to go, said his attorney, Edward G. Marshall, one of the official witnesses. The last execution west of Texas occurred October 22, 1979, on the very spot where Cole died. On that day, Jesse Walter Bishop of Garden Grove, California, went to the gas chamber for gunning down a honeymooner in a Las Vegas casino robbery. Cole's execution, the 50th since the U.S. Supreme Court restored the death penalty in 1976, marked the first time that execution by lethal injection was used in that state, where the gas chamber was born in 1924. Nevada lawmakers authorized the use of lethal injections after George Sumner, director of state prisons, complained that the old chamber had leaks in it. Supporters of the switch declared it a more humane means of executing Cole and the other 28 men and 2 women on Nevada's death row. A one-time San Diego resident who was raised in Richmond, California, the stubby tattooed Cole was convicted in Texas of strangling 3 Dallas women in 1980. He was sentenced to life in prison. In February 1984, Cole was extradited to Nevada, where 7 months later, he received the death sentence for strangling 2 Las Vegas women in 1977 and again in 1979. Cole confessed to a total of 13 murders and once told a psychiatrist that he killed 35 people, all but one of them, women, whom he usually picked up in bars. To the end, Cole rejected all legal efforts to save him. "I just messed up my life so bad that I just don't care to go on," is what he told an interviewer one time. Given Cole's insistence that he be put to death, not even the American Civil Liberties Union attempted to intervene on his behalf. But there was one last-minute effort to save his life. On one night, a Thursday night in Nevada, 5 Supreme Court justices briefly met to review a petition filed earlier in the day by 3 death row inmates, anxious to delay Cole's date with death, fearing that his willingness could hasten their own scheduled executions. The inmates contended that Cole was mentally unbalanced and entitled to better psychiatric evaluation than was available at prison. The High Court disagreed, deliberating about a half an hour before denying a state of execution. Cole spent his last days under constant watch in a special 3rd-story cell less than 20 paces from the death chamber. He wore new prison denims and his old white sneakers. The laces of the shoes had been removed to prevent the possibility of his hanging himself. At 5:30 p.m., Cole was served his very last meal. He was given what he had requested: a tossed salad with French dressing, jumbo shrimp, French fries, and Boston clam chowder. He also finished off what remained of the 25 pounds of cookies and candy that was sent to him by the Newtons. Then Cole, a Catholic, willed away his final hours playing cards with the prison priest. At 12:20 a.m., he received the first of 2 shots of Valium, intended to calm him down. He hardly seemed to need it. "He wasn't nervous at all," said Harold Whitley, who was the prison warden. Outside on the parking lot of the sober gray granite prison, about a dozen people gathered under a crescent moon to light candles in protest of Cole's execution. At 1:43 a.m., wearing leg irons and a chain attached to his waist and wrist, Cole was escorted into the death chamber and lifted onto the table by 4 corrections officers who had volunteered for the job. When the medical equipment was in place, 23 minutes later, the execution began. Positioned behind a wall so that he could not be identified, a volunteer from the prison staff inserted a syringe filled with lethal liquid into the intravenous needle. In all, Cole was injected with 3 drugs to stop his heart and disrupt his breathing. There was no noise, except for the whirling of a nearby wall fan. The witnesses, 1 or 2 of them dabbing moist eyes, watched quietly as Cole convulsed. Cole was declared dead at 2:10 a.m. His body was taken to Carson City Mortuary, where a prominent Las Vegas neurologist planned to examine Cole's brain for any biological evidence that might explain his life of violence. Cole is survived by a brother and 3 sisters. None attended his execution, and his body was not claimed. After an autopsy, his remains were to be cremated. The cell blocks, steaming in the cold night air, were silent as Cole's body was wheeled to a waiting station wagon for the 3-mile ride to the mortuary. The temperature by 2:35 a.m. had dipped to 26 degrees as the vehicle made its way past the prison gate. The death penalty protesters keeping a vigil on the parking lot had already gone home. What about Jerome Brudos? Never heard of him? Jerome Brudos was a serial killer and necrophile who murdered at least 4 women that we know of in Oregon during the 1960s. He has very likely killed even more. He was known as the Lust Killer, or the Shoe Fetish Killer, or some people call him the Shoe Fetish Slayer. His crime started when he was a teenager. Brudos would follow and attack women, and then run off with their shoes. His behavior escalated, and when he was 17, he dug a hole to use as a subterranean prison and keep his victims as sex slaves. Brudos spent 9 months in a psychiatric ward after this discovery. After being released, he settled down and got married, that is, until his blackouts started again. He killed 4 women, and after attempting to abduct a 12-year-old girl, who managed to escape and later identified him. He was featured on Season 1 of the Netflix original series Mindhunter. Jerome, or Jerry Brudos, was born on January 31st, 1939, in a small town known as Webster, South Dakota. His family moved often when he was a boy, bouncing between California, Oregon, and South Dakota. Jerry was the youngest of 2 boys and suffered from a devastating relationship with his mother, who, heartbroken and furious that Jerry had not been born a girl, would dress him as one in order to humiliate him. Psychiatrists examining him later in his life believed that his violent fantasies revolved around a desperate wish to take revenge on his mother. When he was just 5 years old, Brudos found a pair of women's high heels in a junkyard. He brought them home to try them on, and when his mother caught him, she humiliated him for it and destroyed the shoes. What could not be destroyed was his growing fascination with women, their shoes, and his increasingly dark, violent fantasies about both of them. He reportedly went on to steal a pair of high-heeled shoes from his first-grade teacher and was fond of stealing women's underwear from neighborhood homes. High-heeled shoes and women's undergarments would go on to play a large role in his future murder spree. During his teen years, Brudos began stalking local women. He would then either knock down, choke them unconscious before taking off with their shoes. At the age of 17, he threatened a woman at knife point. He forced her to remove all of her clothes and took photographs of her before he eventually released her. Some reports indicate that he also beat her, while others say that he assaulted a second woman who rejected him. After his arrest, he was sent to Oregon State Hospital's psychiatric ward for 9 months. While there, he was diagnosed with schizophrenia. He was allowed to attend school during the day and managed to graduate high school along with the rest of his class in 1957. Like other serious killers, like John Wayne Gacy, his history of violent behavior and dangerous mental health condition did not keep him from forming relationships, at least on the surface. After spending a brief period of time in the U.S. Army and being discharged for his bizarre obsessions, Brudos began working as an electrician. When he was 22 years old, he married 17-year-old woman named Darcy Metzler, and the couple moved to Portland, Oregon, where they later had 2 children together. A daughter named Megan in 1962, and a son named Jason in 1967. Sources say some of his friends described him as a devoted family man who neither drank or smoked, and rarely if ever used profanity. Reports indicate that Darcy was thoroughly brainwashed by Brudos. She followed his orders that she stay at home wearing nothing other than high heels, and she was not allowed to enter either the garage or attic of their home without first making a request over an intercom system that Brudos set up and awaiting his permission. As stated on a Facebook page called The Sinister Sisters, it says, obviously, Darcy knew something was going on, even if she wasn't sure he was a killer. Either that or she was in complete denial. The authorities must have thought she was in on it, because they arrested and tried her as an accomplice. A neighbor even said she saw Darcy help Brudos carry a victim. However, the neighbor's testimony was discredited, and there was no other evidence to prove she was in on the murders. She has always denied knowing anything about the killings, and has since divorced Jerome, who's, by the way, now dead. She changed her name and moved with their children to an unknown location. Now, as recorded on Wikipedia and verified on several other sites, between January 26, 1968 and April 23, 1969, Brudos killed or attempted to kill the following women. Linda Slauson, 19, a door-to-door encyclopedia saleswoman who knocked on Brudos' door in January of 1968. Brudos lured her into the garage while his wife and children were in the house, knocked her out with a wooden plank, and strangled her. He dressed her in different female undergarments and shoes he had stolen, arranged her body in provocative poses, and used a hacksaw to cut her left foot, which he kept in the freezer and used to model his collection of high-heel shoes. He disposed of the body in the Willamette River. What about Karen Sprinker, 19 also, abducted at gunpoint from a car park outside a department store in May 1968. Brudos was dressed in women's clothes during this attack. He brought her to his garage, made her try on his collection of undergarments, and pose while he photographed her, raped her, and strangled her by hanging her from her neck with a pulley. He had sex with the body on several occasions and cut out the breasts to make plastic molds. Afterwards, he tied the body to a 6-cylinder car engine with nylon cord and threw it in the Willamette. Jan Susan Whitney, age 23, a motorist whose car broke down on Interstate 5 between Salem and Albany, Oregon, on November 26, 1968. Brudos offered to drive her to his home with the excuse of letting her call a pickup truck there. While still in the car, he strangled her with a leather strap and raped her post-mortem. He then kept the body hanging from the pulley in his garage for several days, during which he dressed, had sex with, and photographed it. This time, Brudos cut one of her breasts off and made a resin mold of it that he used as a paperweight. Afterward, he tied the body to a railroad iron and threw it on the Willamette along the Slauson's foot, which had rotten. Sharon Wood, 24, attempted to abduct at gunpoint from the basement floor of a car park in Portland on April 21st, 1969. There was also a Gloria Jean Smith, only 15. He attempted to abduct her on April 22nd, 1969. Then there's Linda Saley, 22, abducted from a shopping mall on April 23rd, 1969. Brudos brought her to his garage again, where he raped and strangled her and played with her corpse. He decided not to cut her breasts because they were too pink, and instead drove an electrical current through the body in an attempt to make it jump, which failed. Afterward, he tied the body to a car transmission with a nylon cord and once again threw it in the Willamette River. Jerry was very vain about his photography skills. He considered himself an artist, or artiste. Even what he was photographing were the dead bodies of the women he killed. When a woman who escaped Jerry's clutches picked him out of a police lineup, authorities acquired permission to search his home. Inside of the garage, he had made his studio. They found countless photographs of dead women in various states of dress and dismemberment, as well as some of the several severed limbs. This evidence would prove to be crucial when it came time to arrest and interrogate Brudos in connection with his murders. Brudos was finally apprehended in 1969 after 3 of the bodies had been found in the river. One local college girl interviewed by police described the date she'd gone on with a heavy-set man with light hair and freckles who claimed to be a Vietnam War veteran. He mentioned the dead women who had been found and suggested that perhaps he would take her to the river and strangle her as well. The police asked the women to call him back and arrange a second date, but when Brudos arrived to pick her up, the police were waiting for him instead. After a lengthy interrogation, Brudos confessed to all 4 murders, the 2 attempted abductions, and several additional assaults. He could only be tried and convicted for the 3 murders, as Lawson's body was never found, and Brudos had neither taken photographs of her nor kept his trophy from her body. After pleading guilty, he received 3 consecutive life sentences to be served in the Oregon State Penitentiary. Brudos' wife, Darcy, was arraigned and charged with aiding and abetting in the murder of Karen Sprinkler. After being found not guilty, she divorced Brudos. She moved away, changed her name and the names of her children, and got a court order forbidding both her children from ever visiting or writing to their father. Over the course of his years in jail, Brudos successfully managed to solicit a large collection of women's shoes catalogs from clothing manufacturers he wrote to. He was frequently beaten by fellow inmates, including one occasion on January 1st, 1970, when he was treated for rectal bleeding that was classified as being caused by hemorrhoids or other. Brudos died on March 28, 2006, from liver cancer, after spending a record-breaking 37 years in prison, making him the longest ever incarcerated inmate in the Oregon Department of Corrections. Which brings me to Vasily Komarov. That's right, the Wolf of Moscow. It's a pretty cool sounding name, isn't it? But I assure you, he's not a cool guy. The TrueCrimeDatabase.com has a very interesting article written by someone using the pseudonym Nucleus about this Russian guy by the name of Vasily Komarov. I think you're going to find it both interesting and terrifying. Known to the Soviet citizens as the Wolf of Moscow, Vasily Komarov is considered one of the earliest known Russian serial killers. Born to a poor family in the Russian Empire back in 1871, Vasily would go on to join the Red Army during the Communist Revolution in 1917, and later settled in Moscow, where he became a horse trader to support his wife and children. In 1921, the Soviet police began investigating a series of disappearances and murders which were being committed in and around the Moscow area. The bodies were found buried or dumped in the Moscow River, and soon the corpses of 21 men were discovered. Eventually, the police came to Komarov's home to question him about his other criminal activities, and there they found his latest victim, in the stable next to his home. Managing to escape arrest, he was soon recaptured and questioned over the murders. Komarov admitted to murdering a total of 33 men and was sentenced to death by the Soviet court and subsequently executed for his crimes. Vasily Komarov was born Vasily Ivanovich Petrov in 1871 in Vitebsk, a governorate of the Russian Empire under the Romanov dynasty. The Petrovs had a large but poor family, and as a result of the hardships of the era, many members turned to alcohol, including Vasily, who began drinking at the tender age of 15. When he became of age, he was drafted into the Russian army, where he served for 4 years. He married in 1899 at the age of 28 and moved his new family to the Far East in 1904 during the Russian-Japanese War. There, he was able to earn a small fortune, but the money was squandered, and Komarov soon resorted to crime to pay for his family. He became involved in a robbery at a military warehouse, but was caught and received a 1-year prison sentence. During his imprisonment, he learned his wife had died from cholera. When released, he moved to Riga and married a woman named Sofia, a Polish widow, and they had 2 children. To friends and acquaintances, it seemed to be a happy marriage. However, Komarov was by now an alcoholic and would often beat his wife and children. When World War I began, Komarov was still living in the Baltic when German troops entered, and he was forced to flee along with his family to the Russian Volga region. With the rise of Lenin's Communist Party and the collapse of the Russian Empire under Tsar Nicholas II, Komarov decided, like many disaffected men, to join the Red Army during the October Revolution in 1917. Whilst in the army, he learned to both read and write and eventually rose to the position of platoon commander. He fought against the White Army under General Denikin, who were attempted to restore the monarchy, and was captured by White Army troops, but again managed to escape. Because he feared judgment by the Military Revolutionary Tribunal as a possible deserter, he changed his name to Vasily Komarov and moved to Moscow, or in the nearby area, with his family. There he moved into a house on 26 Shablovolka Street and started working as a horse trader and carriage driver. But he never managed to stop his criminal activities, which included thievery and the sale of illegal alcohol. The catalyst for Komarov's murderous spree appeared to coincide with the new economic policy which Lenin declared in 1921, and which allowed private enterprise. Komarov would attend the local marketplace to sell his horses, and there he would become acquainted with prospective buyers. The man was then brought to his home and offered vodka, and as the victim drank, Komarov would attack them from behind, either hitting them in the head with a hammer, slitting their throat with a knife, or using a wire for strangulation. The bodies were then placed inside a sack and either hidden about the family house, dumped in the Moscow River, or buried in the surrounding countryside. In 1921, the first year, he committed at least 17 murders and another 12 over the course of the next 2 years. In 1922, Sofia Komarov became aware of her husband's murderous nature, but instead of being horrified, she became an active participant in his crimes. Due to the high number of disappearances, the Soviet police began an investigation, which intensified after the bodies of 21 of the men who vanished were discovered. The human remains were found disposed of in garbage sacks, which were dumped on the same successive Thursdays and Saturdays. After an almost 2-year investigation, the police were no closer to catching the killer than when the first bodies were recovered. By early March 1923, the police came to Komarov's house, specifically to question him regarding the sale of illegal alcohol. It was during a search of the stable next to his home that the officers found the body of his latest victim, hidden under a stack of hay. Komarov was somehow able to evade arrest again by jumping out of a window. Several days later, on the 18th of March, the police were finally able to arrest him in Moscow. Investigators began to question witnesses, or anyone who knew Komarov, either socially or through his horse trading business. Several came forward to claim that he was usually seen at market and was observed there every Wednesday and Friday, the days before some of these murders. He would usually arrive without bringing a horse and almost always left with a potential customer. Friends of the family told police that although he was happily married, Komarov was known to be extremely abusive toward his wife and children, and on one occasion he attempted to kill his 8-year-old son. During his interrogation, Komarov admitted to the murders of 33 men. He explained that, best as he could remember, most of these men had been lured to his home with the intention of buying one of his horses. He was quoted as describing murder as an awfully easy job. Detectives suspected the motives in his crimes were purely monetary, but he received very little financial gain from the actual murders. Komarov led investigators to the locations of where he buried some of his victims, but they could only find 6 of the 12 he claimed were buried there. Later in prison, Komarov attempted to commit suicide on 3 occasions. Due to the vicious predatory nature of his crimes, he became known to the citizens of Moscow as the Wolf of Moscow. His wife, Sophia, was also arrested because detectives found it difficult to believe that she knew nothing of the murders that were committed in the stable right next door to the family home. She was tried alongside her husband, and both were found guilty and given the death penalty. They were executed by firing squad in Moscow on June 18th, 1923. Very disturbing, very creepy. These are some lesser-known serial killers. I hope you enjoyed that. Let's take a break and we'll wrap this puppy up. You're listening to Expanded Perspectives. And we're back with Expanded Perspectives.
Whoop, whoop.
Yeah, some very interesting cases. I was just watching the documentary on HBO about Wayne Williams and the Atlanta child murderer.
Yes, sir.
I remember years ago, 1 or 2 or so ago, I was listening to the podcast called The Atlanta Monster by Payne Lindsay. He also does Up and Vanished or whatever.
Yeah, and I think that's where he started it, wasn't it? It was Up and Vanished.
Yeah, and it was a little bit different between his podcast and this documentary. But, and if you haven't seen it, go check it out. Very interesting. I don't know, man. After watching that documentary, I'm not sure that the guy did anything.
After reading, or like you said, listening to the podcast and then watching the documentary, I've got way more questions than I had answers. It's like everything else.
Yeah, I mean,
when you start down this path.
Man, when it comes to convicting someone a life sentence for murder, and the murder of like 23 children, I mean, they just didn't seem like they had a lot of good evidence, nothing concrete. When you know that people were lying on the stand, when you saw the Ku Klux Klan in the area, some of the cops looked like they could have been corrupt. I think that there was the city of Atlanta was on the brink of like a race war or riot, and they just needed to find somebody that they could pin it on to squash all that. And I think that, unfortunately for Wayne, he was the guy. Now, and then again, he might have killed 1 or 2 of the older people. Or it could have been in several ways. But just because you're a creepy guy, just because maybe like you were homosexual or just strange, I mean, that does not make you a murderer.
You're odd. Yeah, it doesn't make you a killer.
I don't know.
That's
fascinating documentary, though.
Well, you're right. You research and you draw these conclusions, and you're still like, what you just described is ideally the reason it would be hard to prosecute, because there's so much more for me to prosecute somebody on something like that. It almost has to be without a doubt, right?
Yeah, that's what you would think. That's what I'm saying.
It would have to be that way. Yeah. And it's the whole, man, the truth is always stranger than fiction. And that story, it always makes me wonder when you look back in history, how many people went down because of what you just described, because it just needed to happen. Because we know people have been exonerated after like 30 plus years, and you realize like they just got railroaded. Like they just so happened they didn't have a rock solid alibi, and they all, they just kind of bent it to fit. And it's just human nature. People make mistakes.
Right. And there's another documentary on HBO called I'll Be Gone in the Dark.
Ooh, I've been wanting to watch that.
I haven't watched that. I have not started that one yet.
But I need to watch that.
It too is about a serial killer, I believe, in California.
It's about the Golden Gate.
That's it.
Killer, yeah. Because I've listened to the podcasts about it and watched the other documentary. I believe it was on Hulu, maybe about it. But yeah, about that whole thing too.
Yeah. So I know it's dark, but for whatever reason, when it comes to those serial killers, it's always interesting.
Well, true crime's a big genre now in podcasting. And what's funny is I would have never thought that would have been a thing, but I guess it makes sense because true crime shows, I mean, hell, I love watching them and reading about it and then watching all the murder mystery shows and all that stuff. But some of them, man, I'm not going to lie, man, I'm not, of course, y'all know I don't like the ocean, but like fear is not, I don't really have a lot of fear, of course, except the ocean, but I'll be listening to those things and have to turn them off, man. I can't listen to like true crime serial killer podcast more than maybe like a couple hours, because I used to listen to them all day all day for a few weeks, and that stuff weighs heavy on me where I'm like, I do not need to be thinking about that stuff.
Particularly with like this Atlanta child murderers.
Yes.
Like when you see they keep showing the pictures of the kids and stuff. Yeah, it does kind of bum you out.
It just weighs heavy on your soul.
But I feel bad for the people because even some of the parents don't think that he did it.
Yeah.
And I just can't imagine, not knowing what happened to your child.
That's me. Yeah.
I can't imagine.
Yeah. For everyone that's lost a child, my heart goes out to y'all, man. I can't. Strong people.
Yeah. Let's talk about something happy.
Let's have something funny, like a rabbit raiding my flowers.
That's silly, man.
I gotta catch him, man. I don't know. I caught him this morning. I sent you the picture of him.
Yeah.
I caught him this morning before we left.
Black rabbit.
Yeah, before we left to come over, and I grabbed him by the ears when he was over by the whole thing, and I took him across and let him go. And I'm like, go back home. But I guarantee you when I get home, he's going to be back in my yard again.
Yeah,
He and I are going to have a discussion before he goes in the crock pot. He keeps messing around. I'm trying to be friendly with him. I'm like, come on, dude.
Right.
I'll tell y'all a story about a rabbit. So my son and daughter had one when they were very, very little. Like, it's one of those ones, I guess you'd get it for like, everybody gets them for Easter or whatnot. Somebody had given us one. And it was one of those brown ones, like the big one that you saw, right?
Yeah.
And we had him like trained like a litter box. Like he'd go to a litter box and go to the bathroom and run around. And he was just loose in the house all the time. And he was funny. And you would surprise him and he would just take off. Like if you went in the bedroom, was doing something, and walked I come out into the living room and he didn't know you were there and you startled him, he would just shoot down the hallway like a furry rocket, just like they do in the wild, just woo, and he just took off. So I come home one day and he's over milling around had like an end table, and he's over underneath the end table, and that's where I would put my wallet and my keys and stuff when I come home from work. And I didn't really realize he was there, and I just took my wallet out and pitched it towards the end table, okay?
Mm-hmm.
It misses the table and lands flat on the floor. Well, I have tile floors, so it lands flat, and there's a pop, pow, when it hits the table or the floor, and it hit the floor about 18 to 24 inches from the rabbit because of where he was at, kind of behind it. He goes super stiff, drops to his side, shakes about 2 seconds, and that's it. He's dead.
You killed him?
I gave him a heart attack. That thing popped beside him, and he dropped dead 2 foot from it. I was like, what is going on? Walked over there, picked him up, felt around on his little face, touched his eye. He no blink. Dude, he was gone.
Wow.
Scared my kid's pet rabbit. And I'm going to tell you, you know how hard that is to live down when you scare your child's pet rabbit?
I'm impressed by how heavy your wallet was with all that cash, I guess. My wallet's very light. Doesn't make hardly any sound if you drop it.
Yeah, I don't think it was cash. I think it was just like nonsense.
It's all those membership cards. You got to be a member of everywhere you go now.
That's right.
Jeez Louise, what is the deal with that?
Yeah, you got to be a member and make sure we're having a change shortage. Don't fall for the change shortage, folks.
Yeah, what is that about?
They're trying to drive us to a cashless society, people. Don't allow it.
Yeah, don't allow it.
I'm not going to get ranting.
That's a conspiracy theory for another show.
I'm not ranting.
If you have any cool stories you'd like to share with me and Cam, please email the show, expandedperspectives@yahoo.com. You can follow the show on all forms of social media. Be careful out there. Till next time, I'm Kyle Filson. He's Cam Hale.
Peace, y'all.